Yeah.
It's a tough one to start with today, but in Northern Ireland, 4 women in the past 6 weeks have been killed. 4 lives, cut short, 4 tragedies. And today we're going to take a closer look at one of those cases, the death of 22-year-old Mary Ward.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by these stories, but we owe it to Mary and really to everyone affected by violence to really understand what happened.
Yeah.
So let's start by carefully unpacking the events that led up to Mary's death.
We know that on September 4th, Mary filed a police report claiming to be a victim of violence. Weeks later, on October 1st, her body was tragically discovered in her Belfast home.
And what's really concerning here is that the timeline isn't quite so straightforward. While the exact date of Mary's death is still under investigation, it's believed she was actually killed around September 25th. So that discrepancy, the fact that her body wasn't found for days, immediately raises questions, about the police response, about the investigation itself.
And it gets even more unsettling when you consider the police's own admission, which is that they had been in contact with Mary multiple times between her initial report on September 4th and her suspected death. They even spoke with her on September 25th, the same day she was last seen alive.
Knowing that, it's hard not to wonder what was missed.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the police ombudsman will be looking into, as per the police's own referral. So this unusual step really underscores the seriousness of the potential failings in this case. The ombudsman will be scrutinizing every interaction between Mary and the police from September 4th onward. Were her claims taken seriously? Was the initial report followed up on appropriately? And most crucially, did the police adequately assess and address the risk to her safety?
Having the police refer themselves to the ombudsman, I mean, that's practically unheard of. It really makes you wonder, did they totally mess this up?
Well, it definitely raises serious questions about the procedures in place when it comes to these cases, domestic violence cases. One of the most critical aspects the ombudsman will be looking at is that risk assessment process, right?
Were there any warning signs, any risk factors present that weren't adequately addressed? These are complex questions, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer when it comes to assessing risk in these situations.
And tragically, Mary's case, like we said before, it's not unique.
Hmm.
It's the 4th woman killed in Northern Ireland in just 6 weeks, which is a terrifying statistic.
It's a stark reminder, this is a systemic issue. Violence against women and girls. We have to remember, behind these headlines, behind every statistic, there's a real person, a life lost, a community forever impacted. And what we see reported, it's likely just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately.
Yeah. The source material mentions over 22,000 domestic abuse and gender-based violence offenses recorded in Northern Ireland in just 1 year. If that's just the tip of the iceberg, how big is this problem, really?
It's incredibly difficult to quantify the true scale. These crimes are very often shrouded in silence, unfortunately. Fear, retribution, societal pressure, a lack of trust in the system. These can all be factors that prevent victims from coming forward. And it's why it's so important, it's so crucial to create an environment where victims feel safe, where they feel supported in reporting these crimes.
So what is being done to try and address this crisis? Our sources point to the Executive Office's recently launched strategic framework to end violence against women and girls. Can you tell us a little bit about this framework?
Well, on the surface, it seems like a positive step. It lays out a 10-year plan with various initiatives aimed at prevention, early intervention, supporting victims. But the devil is always in the details, right?
Yeah.
The success of this framework, it hinges on its implementation. And critically, its funding.
So we're looking at this strategic framework to end violence against women and girls, but like you said, the real test is going to be in how it's actually put into action, right? Do we know anything more about what this framework actually proposes?
Well, it's pretty broad. It covers a range of initiatives, from educational programs, that try to challenge harmful attitudes and behaviors to providing better support services for victims.
Okay.
One of the key areas it focuses on is this idea of early intervention, recognizing the signs of abuse, early on and providing support to those who might be at risk. There's also a big emphasis on holding perpetrators accountable and making sure that the justice system responds effectively to these crimes.
So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
But it still sounds like there are a lot of unknowns in terms of the specifics.
Yeah.
And of course, the million-dollar question is there actually a commitment to, providing the necessary resources to make this more than just like words on paper.
Well, that's the crux of it, isn't it? I mean, we've seen well-intentioned plans in the past kind of fall short because there just wasn't the funding, wasn't the concrete action behind them. So it's crucial that we hold the government accountable. You know, we need to make sure that they're actually translating these promises into tangible change.
And it's certainly easy to feel disheartened, especially considering, the horrific circumstances of Mary's case. Our sources actually include some really, really powerful statements from Sinn Féin MLA Deirdre Hargey. She called Mary's death absolutely sickening and demanded an end to this, to violence against women and girls.
So she's clearly seeing this for the, systemic issue that it is, and it's a sentiment that's echoed by many, including Women's Aid NI. They urged anyone with information to come forward.
And they also offered their condolences to Mary's family. It's a reminder that, beyond the headlines, beyond the statistics, these are real people grieving an absolutely devastating loss.
Yeah. It's so easy to become numb to it all, to the statistics, to what feels like just this endless cycle of violence. But we have to remember each number is a life lost, a future stolen. Mary Ward was a daughter, a friend, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. And her story, like so many others, forces us to confront this really uncomfortable truth. That violence against women and girls, it's still a plague on our society.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners do to actually make a difference?
Well, it starts with awareness, doesn't it? We need to educate ourselves and those around us about how pervasive this issue really is. We need to challenge those harmful attitudes and behaviors whenever we see them. Support organizations that are working to end violence against women and girls. And most importantly, we have to listen to survivors and believe them.
It's a call to action for all of us. Remembering Mary Ward means not just mourning her loss, but actively trying to prevent these tragedies from ever happening again, demanding a society where every woman, every girl feels safe, feels respected, where their lives are valued and their stories are heard.
And that's what we owe to Mary. That's what we owe to every victim of violence. So let's honor their memories by actually working towards a future free from fear.